everybody to the Zoning Development and Housing Committee of Community Board 8. My two co-chairs and I are co-chairs, Anthony Cohn, Ed Hartzog, and my name is Elizabeth Ashby. And we're going to hand it over to Ian, who will tell us how to play the rules here.
Right, welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except the committee co-chairs and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentations and as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by pressing the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, not the wave or thumbs up button, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling on a phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting when the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only, to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you are using an older version of Zoom, you may need to find the React menu, Participants menu, or a button that says More, where you will find the Raise Hand feature. If you plan to speak during the meeting, it would help us if you would rename your device with your full first and last name. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen. We may not be able to see you. Chat me, we're here for support. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ian. And we will begin right away. I will hand it over to Anthony Cohn, who will introduce our first item.
Yes, okay. We have a presentation from HPD on the J51 program. And if they would, and I guess Joy is here, and who else from you all? So if you could unmute Joy. John, are you John Leonard? John Leonard as well?
John's with us. Yeah. Let me know when you're ready, and I'm happy to kick it off. But
okay, go ahead.
John. Okay.
I think we're good. John is also unmuted.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks everyone so much for meeting with us tonight, and thanks Elizabeth for inviting us out to the committee. Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Joy Reeser. I am the director of the Manhattan Planning Team. I'm also joined by my J51 tax incentive colleagues, John Leonard and LaFleur Lewis, and I'll let them introduce themselves once they get into the presentation. But just wanted to say, I know there have been a lot of questions that Elizabeth has had, so this will be the first conversation that HPD, I know you've probably spoken with HPD in the past, first conversation with me, where we'll come out and try to answer some of these questions. And I know we're planning to come out to the committee next month to really do like an Affordable Housing 101 presentation and answer a lot of questions at that point too. But if you have any tonight, we're happy to try and field those, but we can always try and answer those at the later committee meeting as well. And for J51, just want to say that this is really one of many tools that HPD employs to preserve affordable housing. But I know this was of particular interest to Elizabeth, which is why we wanted to come out and speak on it first. And this is a pretty technical presentation. We're happy to share it afterwards. And I'm going to just hand it over to John and LaFleur to take it away from here.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm John Leonard, Executive Director of Tax Incentive Programs. J51 is one of the programs within my unit. We have the old J51 program and we have the new J51R or J51 Reform program that we're talking about tonight. LaFleur Lewis is Director of the J51 programs and Unlocking Doors. LaFleur.
Hello, good evening. Nice to see you all.
So we don't want to get too far into the weeds. Like Joy said, the presentation is a little bit technical. And so we're really just want to introduce the program to you and answer any questions you have, go over the basics. So Joy, we have that presentation now. I'm not sure about sharing. Oh, I'll share my screen. Oh, I'm seeing that it's disabled.
You can request to share screen and we'll allow it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just seeing that it's disabled, I don't see a request.
Let's give it
Or
a
if, Joy, if you have the
try
tech
now. It should
handy.
work for you.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so we'll just get into it. To give you a brief overview, J51 has been around since the 1950s. It was created to serve a very specific need. The city had many buildings with rent stabilized units within it, and the landlords of those buildings didn't have much incentive to repair the properties, keep them up to date, because of the rent stabilized rents on the units. And so there was seen as a need to incentivize the physical health and efficiency of buildings across the city, without leading to increasing rents of those low rent stabilized units. So the program has been around since the 50s. It's gone through several different iterations. The latest iteration, the J51R program, is what we'll be going into more detail on tonight. And so here's just basically the purpose and and a summary of how the benefit works. So J51R, it provides a tax abatement, not an exemption, but an abatement, for up to 70% of approved certified reasonable costs, spread out between 12 and 20 years. We'll get into more detail about how the benefits actually work and how they come off the property. But this 70% of the certified reasonable costs, it spans 12 to 20 years on the property's real property tax bill. So not any other charges, not water and sewer, for example, not emergency repairs charges. It's the actual property tax on the property, for any eligible building that meets the requirements that we'll be going into. And these are some objectives. LaFleur, if you want to summarize these.
Yes, of course. So some of the objectives of the reformed J51 program is to enable, as mentioned by John, the maintenance of an aging housing stock, and of course to preserve the low rents in these same buildings. And it's also targeted, of course, towards home ownership in condos and co-ops. It's it's a program that's dedicated to allowing the affordable repairs and incentivize these landlords who may otherwise choose not to do these repairs. One of the things that was recently updated with the reformed program was our cost schedule, that is now more updated in the allowable cost that we can approve to reflect the current cost it will cost you to conduct these repairs. So our previous schedule was, quite outdated, and we're happy to have a now more updated cost schedule. We're also making eligibility criteria clearer, and the old program had several types of benefits that you can qualify for, and now it is much more straightforward. And the difference is now it's an abatement. So whether it's a government funded, whether it's privately funded, everyone receives an abatement and it's the same level of benefits. So it's much more, it's clearer and more predictable. Again, this is to encourage repairs, upgrades to meet the city's sustainability goals. And a lot of the items that are on the schedule are old items, but also we've added new items that previously weren't there in this endeavor. And of course, the general maintenance and habitability of existing building is always on the forefront of our goal.
Okay, so there's four overall categories of buildings that can qualify for the new J51 program. And please know that this is quite a bit different. A lot of what we'll be talking about is quite a bit different than the old J51 program. So things you may have heard about J51 in years past, all of that's gone away and being replaced by J51R. So the four main categories of eligible buildings, there's rental buildings. Rental buildings have to meet a criteria of at least 50% or more of the dwelling units have to be qualifying rental units with rents at or below 30% of 80%, meaning 30% being the rent amount of 80% area median income. And those units have to be rent stabilized with HCR. Home ownership buildings can qualify with an average assessed value of no greater than $45,000 per dwelling unit as of the commencement date. So this doesn't take into consideration increases in assessed value from the work that they're doing. It's all based on commencement date. If they meet the average assessed value per dwelling unit, they could qualify as a homeownership building. Mitchell Lamas qualify without having to meet these other requirements. And projects that receive substantial governmental assistance, meaning loans or grants from the city or state to rehabilitate the property, to gut rehab the property, etc., those can also qualify without necessarily meeting the other requirements.
So I know you may be wondering, okay, if you have a rental building, how do I figure this out? On our website, we do provide a workbook that will be a part of your application package. Within that workbook, we have a rent roll that you can fill out, and this will actually answer these questions for you. If filled out properly, it will tell you whether or not you will qualify. Okay, and so for rental buildings that have to meet the 50% criteria, we have an example here of 2024 rent guidelines for studios to 3 bedrooms. And so if you intend on filing, our workbook is a very, very helpful tool before you even file that will help you understand whether or not you qualify. Even with the home ownership buildings, you can also conduct an AV test on our workbook. I'm just going to correct something on this slide. We use the actual AV. This is quite small. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but
very small.
So the actual AV, the total of your building and land value divided by the number of units in the building. Okay, and that is what we use to determine the 45,000. Okay, so you can pull this from DOF. You can get this data for your actual taxable value that we will divide by the total number of units, and it's a very quick test that will be one of the tests that you will need to pass to qualify for this program.
Yeah, and on the rental building side, you can see the rents that are needed to qualify as an 80% area median income rent. So we have that for studios through 3 bedrooms. If a unit is rent stabilized and has a rent at or below that amount, it can be a qualifying unit, and a building needs to have 50% or more of those units meeting those requirements. So what are eligible costs? So eligible costs come down to what's available in this, what we call the CRC schedule. There's about 160 different items on the CRC schedule. It's on our website. We can also talk more about it in depth tonight. And so eligible costs are tied to items that are on the CRC schedule that the owner has done and completed work with. The eligible construction has to meet a minimum scope of work of 1,500 per dwelling unit. So something that's a very, very small scope of work, let's say they just repaired a window or something in the building, that's not going to qualify. And for larger buildings, of course, that that 1,500 is going to go up in proportion to the number of dwelling units. So there's that minimum scope to keep in mind. Construction must be completed between June 30th, 2022, which is the sunset date of the old program. So if a building has work that was done, that was completed before June 30th, 2022, they would have qualified potentially for the old program. The J51R program that we're getting into tonight is just for work completed between June 30th, 2022 and June 30th, 2026. And that 2026 date is what's established now. If it gets extended, that may be something that happens in the future. All work has to be completed within 30 months from the commencement of the work. So if you have an entire scope of let's say, a gut rehab or a large scope of work, that work has to be done within 30 months, or you could split the scope of work into multiple applications so that you handle chunks of work that's done within that 30-month period, apply for that, and then apply for the work that was maybe started later on and still completed within 30 months. Eligible construction costs cannot be attributable to increase in cubic content. So what that means is if you take an existing building and you're adding additional floors to the top of the building, any work done in terms of that additional cubic content, those additional floors to the building, that will not qualify for J51. It's just for the existing cubic content of the buildings. And so at the bottom here, you can see a partial list. This is basically just to give you an idea of the types of work that can qualify. Like I said, there's about 160 different items, but things like exterior insulation, heating and cooling systems, elevators, plumbing, doors, door replacements, parapets, pointing, things like that, things that are needed for the habitability of the building and the general maintenance of the building. J51 covers a wide gamut of different building improvements, including new improvements that weren't available in the old program.
So just to continue on what John explained about, work having to be completed within 30 months. Work also, after work is completed within 30 months, you can complete before 30 months, obviously, but as soon as work is completed, you must file your application within 4 months of that completion date. Just tracking back a little bit in terms of what when work commences, we use DOB permits and or architect or engineer's affidavits to establish commencement of work. It depends on the type of work. Again, on our website, we do have a schedule. The schedule does list and identify different permits that will be required for different types of work. We have our customer service team who's also available via email or via phone, who can answer questions when it comes to specificities on items of work that you may have questions on. But those are the things that we do rely on to establish start of work. It's either DOB permit. So if, for instance, if you're doing a boiler, we will require a DOB permit. However, items like windows or doors, you can submit an architect or an engineer's affidavit. We have all of these documents are available in the form of templates on our website. So everything is easily accessible and you can just fill them out. And of course, the application is submitted online. So, we try to make the process as smooth as possible. So in this slide, you see an example of the type of work and the possible cost that can be approved for different types of work. And as you see, it's a per item cost schedule that we calculate. We can only calculate as per the schedule that is also listed online. You can estimate your costs, but this will also be determined by our inspection team. So when you submit your application, our inspectors will go out and physically inspect the site and submit to us a report as per their inspection. Our calculation will be based on their report, okay? And the final calculation is what we refer to as the CRC, the Certified Reasonable Cost. You will receive 70% of that will be applied over a span of 14 to 20 years. Okay, I'm not sure if you all can see this, but this is somewhat of a breakdown of what that would look like in your file.
Yeah, and since we'll be distributing this deck, hopefully you'll be able to see it more clearly. You can consider what the information that's in here more carefully if you want to. But this is kind of like a summary of what an example project looks like with a scope of work and how that translates into the benefits on the property. And this is also an example of what the abatement looks like. Sorry, this is a little bit blurry. But some of you may be familiar with looking up a property's tax bills on Department of Finance. And so if you're looking up a property tax bill and on Department of Finance for a property that's receiving J51R benefits, you'll see it reflected here, like in the example, where you'll see the assessed value, you'll see the value of the J51 abatement, coming off of the taxes due, and then the final annual property tax. And so hopefully for a property that's receiving it, the information that's on Department of Finance's website, their tax benefit lookup, their tax bill lookup, will make it clear to any recipient exactly what's going on and when to expect it to come off.
Right.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, this slide just talks about how J51 supports tenants. So we think this is really important. It ensures necessary work is done to improve the physical health of buildings. There's a notice to tenant prior to commencement of work so that tenants are aware of what's going on. Construction work can't be tied to any MCI increases. So landlords have to waive those MCI increases. The old program required them to only waive a portion of MCI increases. This does away with that. There's no MCI increases on properties receiving J51R. And qualifying units have to remain rent stabilized for the duration of the benefits. And owners have to fix HPD violations before benefits are granted. Sorry, LaFleur, you want to add anything to that?
No, I guess I can just reemphasize something that, a lot of folks who may have been familiar with the old program may not be familiar with now is the pre-filings. It is very, very, very imperative if you do intend to apply for J51 benefits prior to commencing construction. Please file the pre-filings. They're free to file. It's imperative. You will not qualify for the program if they're not, if you don't have the notice to tenants. You may qualify without the notice of intent. However, you will pay a notice of intent fee, but it is very imperative. If you do intend to file, please file the pre-filings.
Yeah. Yeah, and our last slide is just a how to apply slide. So this gives you, and you'll have this in the print in what we distribute. This shows our webpage where you can find more information. You can find the application materials. There's also the J51 customer service email that's listed there. You can email that email or send even mail to the J51 unit at this address. And on our website, you'll find all of these documents that are bullet pointed. I should point out that most building owners hire filing reps to handle the application for them. Filing reps are typically experienced professionals that handle J51 on a regular basis on behalf of their clients. And so oftentimes building owners don't want the responsibility of filling out applications themselves. And so they hire a filing rep, and then an authorized filing rep for an application becomes our point person, HPD's point person for the application throughout that process. And yeah, that's it for our presentation.
Very good. Thank you. And so we're now going to go into questions, and we have are there any members of the public here, actually? And do any of them, there are a couple, actually quite a few. All right, since I don't see any members of the public who are lined up to speak, let's start with Michelle. Michelle, then Kimberly, then Elizabeth Rose.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. I'm just curious, where do the filings start? In other words, initially you have a property. Where does the incentive to do the repair begin? Does the landlord notice or note that he has repairs that need to be done? Are there city inspectors that come in on any regular basis that then give that landlord a list of repairs that have to begin? In other words, where is this generated?
Yeah, I think that comes down to a variety of different causes that can spur the need for improvements. It could be anything from a building owner simply wanting to make needed improvements or wanting to make any improvements to the property that might qualify, and knowing that these incentives are out there to help incentivize it. But it can come from a variety of other sources. Like was mentioned in the presentation, we do require that HPD violations, B and C violations specifically, have to be cured before J51 benefits can be granted. And so building owners that have those violations that want to partake in the program's benefits, they have a direct incentive or requirement, I should say, to fix those violations if they want to receive those benefits. And the program is essentially designed for those two things to go hand in hand. So if a building has violations, the work that should be able to qualify for J51 should be related to fixing those violations. And then when the work is completed and presumably the violations are fixed, then they come and apply to us. And so without this incentive, building owners would have a much more inclination, much more of an incentive to let those HPD violations stand, rather than fixing them and getting them the benefits in tandem.
Yeah, and to add to that, there are instances of emergency repairs. Say, for instance, the boiler goes out. You can file for J51 benefits for repairing the boiler under duress. We do have a provision where we will allow you to file it and file the notice of intent, upon the emergency repair permits filing. So, there are a variety of reasons why these repairs will be done.
Hi, thank you all so much for the presentation. How many buildings do you project will qualify under that 50% threshold? And the follow-up to that would be, do you know what that population would be for CB8?
Yeah, so we don't have any data on how many buildings may qualify. I think trying to gather that type of information would just not be practical in terms of knowing the entire universe of potential qualifying buildings. But we do have, the program is quite active since it launched. We have an active, LaFleur's team has an active caseload of applications coming in. We'll be continuing to get them well into 2026. But yeah, we don't have any reliable information about how many buildings might qualify and how many buildings may be intending to qualify within CB8.
Do you have a goal then if you don't have the population?
It's hard to say that we have a goal because this is an as-of-right program established by law and pursuant to the rules. And so what what our team does is we're administering the program the way that it was set up. And so our goal is every qualifying building that applies, we want to make sure that their application is handled efficiently, quickly, and that they get the benefits that are owed to them. And we want to also ensure that the protections of the tenants is maintained and that buildings meet those requirements. So that's really where our role comes into it. So, but our goal is that as many buildings as possible should make use of the benefits, and the city will benefit from that as well.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Elizabeth Rose. There you are.
So thank you. Following up on that last comment, it seems to me, given the requirements, that very few buildings in Community Board 8 would potentially qualify, an extremely small percentage of buildings. You actually answered many of my questions during the presentation, so thank you very much. The one remaining question that I had is, in this example, it looks like of the just shy of $450,000 of current payments, the maximum benefit is an abatement of $335,000, of which you can only claim 27 and change per year over 20 years. Do you have you calculated the net present value of that benefit over the course of the 20-year period? Because that would be the way a landlord would look at it.
Yeah, the program isn't designed with a net present value or any kind of adjustment to the certified reasonable cost. But certainly, you're right that building owners that are trying to underwrite their benefits and trying to make forecasts, they would presumably have net present value factored into that in terms of their financial projections. But no, on our end, in terms of what's granted, I should also note that our role in it largely ends after the benefits are granted. And so what LaFleur's team is doing is issuing a certificate of eligibility with a dollar amount on it. It's Department of Finance that figures, okay, they can use this maximum 8 1/3% of that CRC each year. They're the ones that actually calculate that and administer it, but they don't do any sort of net present value, any sort of inflation for adjustment, cost of living, nothing like that gets factored into it.
Okay. So in effect, the value of the abatement is somewhat below the allowable abatement amount.
Yeah,
When you factor in the time value of money, it's the value is not $335,000. The value is somewhat below that for the landlord.
yeah, and I think it's also important to note that there's essentially like $3 figures here in terms of the costs. There's the claimed costs that the owner is saying that they did, and then certifying those costs with us. Those claimed costs may be above what the maximum allowable CRC is per item, and the allowable costs can further be reduced by the inspection that takes place. We didn't get too much into it in the presentation, but every J51R recipient, the buildings get inspected by a team at HPD, our builds division, our architectural services division. And so they inspect the work that is being claimed. An owner might be claiming 30 windows. Builds may do an inspection and say, no, they only did 28 windows, or only 28 windows qualify for whatever reason. And so that can further reduce the amount. And so basically, you're starting out, let's say, at that 400,000 claimed cost, that can be further reduced because of those things. And then it lands on a certified reasonable cost on the certificate.
Okay,
LaFleur, is
thank
there
you.
anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered everything. Just as far as the claimed cost, because we are guided by the certified the cost schedule rather, we aren't going to be able to give you more than what the schedule allows us, right? And I think a lot of the times when we receive applications, owners and applicants, they expect to get exactly what they spent, right? And what I can say, is oftentimes it's slightly lower. We will give you the most that we can, which is dollar amount per the schedule.
Yeah, and I'll just add that one of the biggest complaints about the old J51 program, and probably one of the biggest issues that reduced the amount of participants in the program, was the fact that the maximum CRC allowances were not regularly being updated. So by the time the program sunsetted, the CRC allowances on qualifying work were far below what owners were spending, and so they didn't even want to go through the hassle of applying and trying to get the benefits with the requirements in place. So the J51R program is a massive improvement, I think, from the viewpoint of landlords, in terms of increasing those maximum allowable costs.
Well, I have to say, you guys have made me like do a desperate search on my desk for where is my old HP 12C. And so that is not a search that I have done of late. Thank you. You're bringing back a lot of nostalgia for me.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, we have DJ next, who should be unmuted.
There we go. Hi, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. I'm curious if the abatement can be used for local law 97 upgrades, which I think a lot will be made in the coming years.
Yeah, we do expect that there'll be a large amount of intersection between work that's being done for local law 97 and work that happens to qualify. So there's certainly nothing prohibiting that intersection of the two things. And we think the two will complement one another to a large extent. But J51R would have essentially existed without local law 97, but we think it's something that that can complement it really well and increase the universe of buildings out there that want to make use out of it.
Given the amount of upgrades coming down the pipe as a result of the law, I see LaFleur's caseload exploding, which
It
is
could
probably
happen.
something to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
it could very well
Thank
happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Michelle, go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I was asking my follow-up when I got cut off, so I just want to ask. One of the things is the initial repairs have to be cured at the expense of an owner. If there anything against the building, it's at the expense of the owner before this program can kick in.
Yeah, they don't receive any benefits in terms of laying out the cost for the work and paying for the cost of the work. They only receive the benefits after completion is done and after they go through the application process. Though you may want to keep in mind that one of those four broad categories of projects that can qualify includes projects receiving substantial governmental assistance. So some building owners may be getting that type of incentive that helps offset the cost or even pay for the cost of needed repairs. But outside of that, there wouldn't be any anything other than the owner having to pay it outright.
So they can already be getting benefit about doing repairs that are existing before they attempt to file for this program?
Well, it wouldn't be a benefit per se. If a project is receiving substantial governmental assistance, that would be in the form of loans or grants. Some of those are tied to rehabilitation of properties, oftentimes with affordability requirements in place, like a regulatory agreement. HBD has a variety of preservation financing programs that existing buildings can go through. So those buildings getting that type of financing, it wouldn't be a J51 benefit that's paying for their work, but the financial assistance would not only help offset the cost of the work to the owners, but also enable them to qualify without having to meet the other requirements, such as the rent threshold requirement, and the assessed value requirement.
Okay. One of the questions I was going to ask, so I think Elizabeth asked it, I want to make sure I heard it right, is what is the maximum allowable amount of repairs? Did I hear you say 335,000?
No, the 335 is just the example in slide 7 that basically has a theoretical project starting off at $447,000 in allowable costs and ends up getting it reduced.
So what is
So
the
that's
maximum amount of repairs?
the maximum amount is really tied to how many different items they're claiming. So every single item, all 160 plus items on the CRC schedule have a maximum allowable for that
Each
item.
one has a
Each
maximum.
item. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Does this program travel with the building? In other words, if the building was sold and it was in the middle of these repairs or about to apply, does this go with the building, not with the owner?
That's right. There's not any real ownership requirements per se that the building has to maintain compliance with. And the benefits are granted on the property. And so it can change ownership, receive benefits. Also, your question kind of makes me realize an important thing to mention is that buildings can receive J51R benefits concurrently with old J51 program benefits. They can receive those concurrently in addition to concurrent J51R benefits. So basically, if a building owner splits up a large scope of work into multiple applications or does additional work later on, let's say several years from now, they can get J51R benefits in addition to their current benefits. So you can have overlapping benefits in addition with the old program as well.
And is it the program that sends the work out to bid? Is it the program that monitors the bidding and cost process? Or is it the landlord who has received the financing?
Well, the owner is applying to us with claimed costs and certifying those costs with us, showing establishing proof that the costs were paid, and then beyond that, they're just limited to what's the maximum CRC allows for that item, in addition to whatever reductions might happen because of the inspections.
So does he have to show a bidding process as to how he came to that conclusion, that he's redoing the pipes and he got 3 bids on it and this is the money he needs, or is that not the process?
LaFleur, your team doesn't review anything like that, right?
No, pre-commencement, no, we do not require the owners to show any of
Okay, last question, I promise. The local 97 law, from what I saw in this really applies in apartments or co-ops with a value, an individual value of 45,000. Is that what I saw on the slide?
per
Okay. That's the maximum assessed value.
And that will, so with the local law 97, that's the same requirement for those repairs, so that they wouldn't, a building having a value of an apartment more than that would not qualify for funding for anything for the local law 97 repairs either. In other words, that 45,000 value stands across across owned entities.
Well, just in regards to J51R benefits, there's other programs out there. There's other financing programs out there.
Right.
But in terms of receiving J51R benefits, I should also note the assessed value cap is only applicable to projects trying to qualify under the homeownership tier. It's not applicable to projects that qualify as Mitchell-Lamas, as substantially governmentally assisted projects. And it also doesn't apply to the rental buildings. The rental buildings just have to meet those rent threshold requirements.
Right, but this would be condos or co-ops that are privately owned. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Michelle. Ed. Oops, you have now been muted. You muted yourself.
Can't get unmuted.
There
Oh,
you
Brandon,
are.
Ian, I'm the co-chair. You can leave me unmuted, buddy. So I appreciate the presentation. And just sitting and listening, and this is not to you all. You all implement the program. My head is swimming. And I consider myself a child of New Deal parents. And I'm a firm believer in the Great Society. I have a PA in public administration. I get it. I'm for it. But my head swims because, if I may, a lot of what we do with housing in New York City, this is voluntary information that you're getting. Am I correct in that, right? People voluntarily give you the information. You're not out there with subpoena power doing landlords. This is right. I've picked this up over 10 years, right? So all this is voluntary. And what I'm getting at is how hard this is, and it seems quite vexing to me as to why we're not getting anywhere on these vacant apartments. And I know that's not our point tonight, but what gnaws at me, having taken economics from people who actually serve on the Council of Economic Advisors and understanding micro and macro, that the build takes a while. And we have 200,000 allegedly 200,000 empty apartments, ranging in repairs from a refrigerator to a stove to a full-on. And again, full disclosure, I grew up as a child of parents who had rental homes, so not apartments, but I'm sympathetic to small landlords with 6 or 7 units trying to live the American dream, buying a building, all that. So my question is this J51 tied in any way, shape, or form to these issues regarding what we hear? And it could just be urban legend. This could be just false information, that some of these apartments, these 200,000, are not being brought back online, either because J51, because of your schedule, is outdated, or because the bureaucracy is too much, or is it a different program that would allow us to replace these refrigerators, these stoves, which in my humble opinion cannot take months and months and months to do unless for some reason Lowe's and all the other people who supply these appliances don't have them. Is that incorrect or?
I think that's entirely possible, but I can just tell you from our perspective, we certainly heard complaints about the old program that the CRC items were outdated, and that was limiting participation with the program. So one of the major goals with the J51R program was to get those maximum CRC amounts dramatically updated. To the extent that that may have contributed to vacant apartments, I can't speculate on that. It may entirely be true, though.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also, you're only getting 70% on whatever you spend, right? So you got to lay it out, and then you may or may not get 70% of whatever you laid out. That's not to oversimplify, but just.
Yeah, that's right. Recipients just get 70% of that certified reasonable cost, and it's spread out over 12 to 20 years. So they don't get 100%, but we still think that it's a powerful incentive for versus a building owner not receiving anything for the work that's being done.
And how do we measure that, by the way? How do we put a metric on that to know the difference? How do we know whether or not that actually is happening? Right? We can say it, but do we have a way without this voluntary information of actually knowing? I'm just curious. Just wondering.
Yeah, we don't have information on the scope of rehabilitations that might be getting done that don't apply for J51. So you're right. This is based on the people that apply, the people that submit this information voluntarily. But we have seen a positive response to the new J51R program, and we're listening to people. We're taking input from people in terms of what their complaints are. And I think LaFleur's team especially has gotten a lot of positive response. We're certainly seeing plenty of uptake in terms of applications coming in. And so I think from that vantage point, it seems like a success from our perspective. Somebody might have a different perspective,
And last question, and not to sound like folks from the 80s destroying all the regulations, because I think in this industry we need it, but to the extent that we can create efficiencies, shall we say, using the economic term, create efficiencies, since we have a new administration coming in, and I see quite a robust number of committees and people expressing their opinion, which is great. Any hope for us in terms of maybe streamlining, creating efficiencies in this program with respect to bureaucracy, red tape on your end? I mean, just you're getting all kinds of, I'm sure on your end, you would appreciate maybe having to deal with less paperwork. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the main highlights of the new program was increasing efficiency, reducing the amount of red tape, like you said. Compared to the old program, there's far less red tape, far less delays, and far less. From my perspective, far less frustration from applicants in terms of them now being able to better understand the application process, be able to deal directly with us, and have things explained in terms of what's needed. I think it's a much more efficient process, and we're always putting a lot of energy into making the process as efficient as possible, eliminate as much red tape as possible. And I think LaFleur and her group have done a lot in terms of efficiency, in terms of customer service and customer satisfaction.
Yeah. To add to that, with the old program, it allowed for 12 months to complete an application. Oof. And loopholes are often used. Exactly.
Oh my God.
Were often used in that process and would stretch that 12 months a lot longer.
How do you plan? 12 months.
Exactly. And and the old program at some points received thousands of applications, hundreds in the later years. This new program, you complete your work within 30 months, you have 4 months to file an application. As soon as you file your application is expected to be completed at filing. It allows us to have a more streamlined review, inspection, and approval. So, we've seen a lot of cases. We've approved quite a few of them already, in that respect. And so we hope to even get a more online, streamlined process. So far, it's been quite positive.
That's great. That's great. Thanks so much. Sorry to take so much time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. We have Kimberly again, Elizabeth Rose again.
Hi, thank you again for answering all of these questions. Apologies if this is a very like inside baseball question, but some of your responses to Elizabeth Rose's questions made me think. I know that with this program, in your presentation, you said that for anyone a part of J51R, no MCI adjustments can be accounted for, but how is that actually being enforced within HPD? I hope it's like the same people who approve J51R are the people who would be saying no to any MCI adjustments. But can you tell me a little bit more about how the left hand knows what the right hand is doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're separate teams in terms of what we do and how the MCIs are administered. But they do have to attest that they're not going to be claiming MCI increases, and there is some behind the scenes cross-checking, if you will, to ensure that remains the case. And also the notice to tenants that we mentioned. That also advises tenants of their rights, and so we think that helps increase compliance and reduce anything with owners straying from that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Thank
There
you,
you go.
Kimberly. You just triggered another question for me. Can someone just, for people who are not as into the weeds, explain what an MCI is for everybody? And then I have my question for you.
Yeah, so MCIs stand for, and sorry if we had abbreviations throughout the presentation that weren't clear. We kind of live in acronym soup with what we do, but MCI stands for Major Capital Improvement, and it allows landlords to increase the legal rent on rent stabilized units when they do rehabilitation work on their properties that have rent stabilized units in them. And there's a whole schedule and system behind it, which I really can't speak as an expert on. But it's essentially serves sort of a similar purpose to J51 in terms of serving to incentivize owners with rent stabilized units to do work, because then they know that there'll be increases in rent. Also with the idea that it would go hand in hand with rents increasing alongside increasing assessed valuations from the work that's being done. So that's kind of like the big picture idea of how MCIs work. And so one of the goals with J51R was to eliminate that sort of double dipping approach, right? Where owners could get J51 benefits and still get some MCI increases. We think one of the big improvements to this program over the old program was that they now have to waive 100% of the MCI increases, so that helps tenants even more than the old program did.
Okay, so with all that information, and that actually even makes the math that I've just done even more interesting. So let's continue with our hypothetical example of about $450,000 cost of work, which generates about $335,000 of potential abatement over a maximum of 20 years. Let's assume that you take the maximum amount each year in the first 12 years. The net present value of that with a 5% rate of return is about $260,000. So basically, the landlord here will, on a net present value basis, this whole project is going to cost him about $200,000 to do after the value of the abatements and a very low cost of capital. So if they can't, in fact, apply any MCIs against this project, where do you expect that $200,000 that this is costing the landlord to come from? Under the circumstances of these extremely low rent buildings that qualify, the likelihood that their rent roll over, pick a time period is going to cover that $200,000 of out-of-pocket net present value costs seems to me to be relatively low.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're really privy to the financial calculations that owners are doing to see whether or not it makes sense for them to apply. We're not a part of that process, but I can say that given the number of applications that we see coming in, we do know that it's an attractive program to a lot of building owners. And we're trying to get the word out about the program so that building owners learn more about it and increase the participation rate. But you're right that some building owners are going to look at what they could potentially qualify and decide that it's not worth it. We hope that that's less common with the new program. We think it definitely will be compared to the old program, simply because of the much richer benefits that they're able to get.
So then my last question, and this is just a factual question. This applies to buildings that have at least 50% of the apartments qualify. If the landlord performs the same improvements across 100% of the apartments, 50% of them make the building eligible, 50% of them wouldn't. Can the total costs, inclusive of the costs for the ineligible apartments, qualify?
Yeah, definitely. If you have, let's say, 100 units in existing units in a building, and you meet those 50% are qualifying with 80% AMI registered rents, the work that you're doing on the entire building can qualify for benefits. The only caveat to that is if you're expanding the cubic content of the building, you're adding additional floors, that won't receive benefits. But there's no prorating of benefits for the non-qualifying units. That 50% threshold qualifies the building.
So theoretically, the 50% units that are not stabilized or not qualified, they also have to be non-stabilized. The landlord could, if those other 50% of the units were market rate, the landlord could raise the rent on those to recapture the remaining portion of the costs.
It's potentially possible. It's also possible that there'll be units that are rent stabilized that are above the threshold. And so those would remain rent stabilized. But yeah, you could have market unit rents in there that would not be subject to restrictions.
Right. But even the rent stabilized above the threshold, the landlord could not apply for MCI for any of those units.
That's correct. Yeah, I don't think we've been hit with that specific question, right, LaFleur? But I believe that's.
Yeah, no, we've not been hit with that specific question. But my first answer will be we're only concerned about the 50% that would qualify, and that would be subject to regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the presentation. Let me put this way. I just heard that you said that, and I knew that you provide money for the boiler replacement, which is good. Now, somebody asked about the Local Law 97, and you said it worked in tandem with this program. Probably I said myself, no. Let me explain you why. I think it's a very good idea to work along with Local Law 97. But the issue is right now, Local Law 97 to 2030 is basically just put an insulation, put very simple stuff, and you will qualify for 2030. The issue is to reach 2050. And 2050, it must be reduced to zero carbon emissions. There is some possibilities to produce carbon emissions. But the issue is just coming somebody say, I need to replace the boiler. You have an amount of money for that. But after 5 years, it is required to comply with the local law 97. And you won't comply unless you make a more drastic actions that actually leads to 2050. So at that time, probably most likely that you're going to start replacing the facades, the cladding. And that is what is the major issue right now, because the cladding of the building is the major issue in the local law 97. That will lead to 2050. And then if you replace the facades on 2030, you will find out that you bought a boiler that is overdimensioned, that you're wasting energy. So it is not coherent, your program, with local law 97 to reach 2050. It is probably right now, yes, but the major issue is the load reductions. That is the thermal load reduction. I think that is the key of all of that. If you reduce drastically, so you have the real dimensions of the boiler. And then the boiler is going to be less expensive, and then the boiler is going to perform properly in the way that it should be done. So if you provide these grants for the boiler replacement, I think it's a waste of money, because probably in 10 or 15 years, you got to replace again, because the boiler will be overdimensioned. And also, most likely, you should work along with the cladding. The cladding is the only part that reduces drastically the carbon emissions, because you reduce the thermal loads. So have you ever think in that direction? Are you planning to do in that direction something to coordinate with local law 97?
Yeah, so we do think the J51R program will have synergy for some projects, for some buildings meeting local law 97's requirements. We think there will be overlap. We think there will be synergy between the two. But J51R wasn't designed specifically as a local law 97 program or anything tied to it directly. And you're right, some building owners will find that the work they did that qualified for J51R maybe wasn't sufficient. But many owners engage with filing reps and expediters who are experts in this. And I would say if they need advice on what improvements are going to both qualify for J51R benefits and help them in the long run in terms of local law 97, they can turn to those experts for advice on that. But yeah, sometimes some of the work won't overlap perfectly with improving a building's ability to comply with local law 97.
One quick comment. The Department of Buildings, they went to with DOB now, everything in the web. One of the reasons that they said is exactly there are people such as the expediter that create some trouble, moral trouble in the system. So they try to avoid them because they know how to trick the system. And that is, they prefer to avoid the contact direct, human beings with human beings. Now, human beings with the computer. And I think to have an advice in that direction, I think is wrong. One. And two, my recommendation is you have to start looking to change in the direction to work along with the local law 97. It will be very helpful. By the way, you have a beautiful programs in HPD that help in that direction, the other department that work in that direction. And I think it's very clear that you should start working along with your other departments. I have some questions, some concerns, but I think they're running in the right track. And
Yeah, I just want to highlight the as of right nature of a program like J51. We're administering the program under the law and under the rules. That's what our role is. But to the extent that that synergy between our programs and other programs can be increased, like we're always having discussions. We have discussions with many other parts of HPD to see about overlap between programs, how things can complement one another in terms of requirements and what these programs are meant to incentivize. And so we are looking to make this program work as well as we can, to be complementary with other programs and other laws, other requirements.
I think definitely you need to work in that direction. And thank you so much for your answer.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marco. Adam had his hand up, but he put his hand down. Okay.
Now it's back up again.
No, now it's back up. Okay.
Now it's up.
I will just say, and I think my friend Elizabeth Rose was alluding to this. This is a Band-Aid for a war wound. We have a massive issue with the IAI limits for rent stabilized apartment buildings. Properties in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx are trading for 10 and 11% cap rates, whereas they used to trade for a half to a third of that. The inability of landlords to raise rents as a result of renovations is going to eventually cripple the housing in the city if it hasn't already. Some say 60, some say 80, some say 100,000 apartments. The doors are locked and no one's getting in because the landlords can't afford to do $150,000 of renovations on a unit and raise the rent only a couple $100 a month. So I appreciate the J51 efforts. It is an appropriate solution for certain landlords, but until Albany fixes the rent stabilization issues, rolls back HSTPA, and does something so that landlords aren't forced to, like landlords are trying to mail keys back to the bank, and the bank is saying, I don't want them. Don't send me your keys. I don't want your building. So something needs to be done on a big picture to fix this. I know that what HPD is trying to do is an appropriate targeted response, and it does work for some landowners, but you know, what we saw with the signature loans, that was just a canary in the coal mine for just the epic disaster that is New York City rent stabilized housing. I'll stop.
Thank you, Adam. And I believe we have Ed.
Yes. Yes, I do have my hand up. So I go back to that. Adam has a very good point. And so what I was curious is it the state? Is it the city? Is it a new entity, a new office, a new bureau, a new someone? Because again, good public policy can only be made with good information, I believe. I may be, alone in that view. And so good information means correct information in my mind. And that means knowing. I hear so much about these vacant apartments, and every one of them costs $150,000 and I hear wild amounts. And what I'm curious is, what agency would be responsible for collecting the data on each apartment and what they require with respect to a particular repair? And I understand people have to make a profit, but you must forgive me, full disclosure, I'm still smarting over, I think it was something happened in 2007 and 2008. I believe it involved housing and something about information, but I could be mistaken. Anyway, it's a new era, and that's the past. But my question still remains, in terms of information coming from landlords, is there an agency? Is HPD responsible for it? Is it the folks at the state? Who is it? And is it still just self-reporting? And can we ask our elected officials at the city, again, new group in Albany, perhaps, a little more active, to be a little more forward thinking in their seat in terms of maybe requiring folks to actually go out and create this database so that we can find out just what it is and maybe target, because again, I believe that targeting it is more efficient, again, for efficiencies. And so I ask you all, because you're in this every day, you're in the fight every day. So I'm just curious in terms of information. I'm sure you would like the good information as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think every program like ours gathers information for specific contexts, right? Like you had alluded to before, we're not getting information on the buildings that don't apply. And so we have the information that we gather. Other programs have the information that serves their own context. And the issues that you're highlighting are something that is something that's trying to be addressed broadly with interagency cooperation, HPD working with HCR, DOB, et cetera. And there's a lot of different prongs to that effort. And I think what we're doing is just one little piece of that puzzle. And we're just trying to do that part of that as best we can.
Do you have a suggestion then with respect to that? Just to toss it out, if you had your druthers, if you could, what it might be?
Yeah, I can't really make any broad suggestions on housing policy that would be like outside of the scope of what my job is, strictly speaking. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Oh.
I think John's absolutely right. I would just, I'm curious a little bit more to hear about sort of like this database that you're envisioning. You're just hoping to get more information about what units would need to be repaired.
Yeah, I guess I have to tell you that I just, maybe it's being in law school, wanting to be a DA and always being skeptical of anything I hear and always, trust but verify. Well, Fleur, I see you smiling. Yes. So trust but verify. And a lot of things going on, and so what I'm envisioning is I hear so wildly different stories. And so as a trial attorney, I have to tell you, someone comes in my office and they tell you a story, and then the next person comes in and it's like, wow, were they, this happened in traffic court. My clients would come in and tell me, and then the cop would come in, they're talking about a totally different intersection. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So when I hear wildly different stories, and Adam is also, he's well versed in this. So when he tells me something, I listen to what he's saying and I figure he has this information. But then I hear other stories about it's just a refrigerator. And maybe it's just I'm getting too old, or I'm impatient, or I've been around government too long, but I'm just looking for results. And it just seems so, well, I'll just say it, absurd. It just seems absurd on its face that all these vacant apartments, we have to wait for people to drill holes in grounds, build more luxury condos in our neighborhood to get something somewhere else, when we have 200,000 empty apartments ranging from a paint job, been there, done it, refrigerator replacement. These are not heavy lifts. This is not 100 grand. This isn't 300 grand. I mean, so that's what I'm trying to say is that's the database I'd like to see. What is the gradations? Because every month we kind of have a variation of this back and forth. And so how many of the apartments just require a paint job? And I know local 9, I get it, paint jobs, it's different, but a stove, something simple, a bathroom. Not every apartment is a gut renovation is what I'm getting at. It can't be. Are they all gut renovations? I hear wildly different stories. So that's what I'm getting at. And I know it's voluntary. So again, you're only as good as the information that people voluntarily want to give you. So that's what
Understood.
I'm saying.
I think that makes sense. John mentioned that there's sort of this multi-pronged approach. We do have other programs that folks can tap into if they do have repairs to make, but again, they're all voluntary. So I think, yeah, this is good feedback though, and really appreciate you raising this.
So maybe what we need is in a law, elected officials, maybe we need a law that requires landlords to report. Maybe. Just tossing it out there. I'm not the elected one, but I just toss it out there. Anyway, sorry. Thank you so much, though. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ed. I think we have reached the end of our comments. I'd only like to highlight one thing Elizabeth Rose brought up right at the beginning, which is that anecdotally, I don't know if very many properties in Community District 8 qualify. Certainly, zero of the co-ops and condos qualify. And so I guess one of the questions I would have is, how did you arrive at the values, let's say, for the home ownership qualification of the program?
Yeah, so that dollar amount is in the 45,000 per DU assessed value limit is in the is a statutory requirement, and so that wasn't something that we at least within my unit came up with, so to speak. And so we just have that to qualify buildings. Whether or not it should have been higher or lower, there's certainly could be a healthy debate over that, I think.
Yeah, now and so that was the state.
The state authorized a local law that
Okay.
also enabled the program. And then in addition to that, there's rules of the city of New York that were added to flesh out the program and establish things that the state and local laws authorize the city to establish. So some requirements are in the rules as well.
Okay. And then one other question that sort of follows on that, is there any kind of scale, any kind of scale issue where, for instance, I think certainly everyone in Community District 8 would believe that it is more expensive to build in Manhattan, or to make a repair in Manhattan, or to have somebody even just come to your apartment in Manhattan, than it is in some of the other boroughs. And is there any kind of currently any kind of consideration as to the location of the applicant?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's just not something within our scope to consider.
That's fine. It was literally just a question as to how it's sort of organized.
Yeah.
Okay, and actually, since Peggy has a question, I think we can.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for this presentation. I wonder, my building, for example, is all rental, but less than 50% of the units are rent stabilized. However, our building is experiencing financial difficulties. Is there a different program that a landlord in that position could apply to for aid in addressing the problems of the building, even though it does not meet that 50% level?
Well, I can say HPD has a variety of preservation financing programs and a variety of rehabilitation related programs outside of the tax incentives unit. Joy, I don't know if you want to add anything about that.
I don't know any off the top of my head, but happy to bring some resources and information next time.
Oh, that would be great. That would be
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you. And also, would it be possible for you all to sort of look at the applications that J51R applications that you've already received, and sort of help us understand where those buildings are in the city? I mean, and obviously it would just be helpful for us to understand sort of how this might apply to even to the rental buildings in Community District 8, because I certainly don't have any kind of information, and I'm not sure if there's any that's readily available for us.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly want the program to be as transparent as possible in terms of the results that are happening, and to the extent that information can be released, there are resources out there like open data. To the extent that things can be released, there's a freedom of information law that allows members of the public to get records on buildings and things like that. And so we, within the scope of what we're allowed to, we want any available data to be out there for the public to use. And I think you should hopefully see data become publicly available.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing, well, at least seeing you, Joy, next month, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so
Great,
much for
thanks,
having us.
So
Thank you.
I'm going to turn this over to Ed for our agenda item 2.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. And agenda item 2 for us, I thought we were moving, isn't that next month's? Sorry.
No.
Hold on.
All right. Elizabeth,
Um,
where'd it go?
I had it. Sorry. My apologies.
That's all right.
Do we want to mention our item 2? I think we
Yes,
will.
it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, the solutions to the vacant apartments and loss of affordable housing. Right. That's what we're queuing up. Sorry about that. I was thinking of next month's meeting with our folks from HPD. Sorry about that. Right, of course. Tonight following this up, kind of following what we were just talking about. Solutions to, or discussing solutions to this loss of vacant apartments that we're having, and especially the loss of affordable and rent regulated housing. And I know probably everybody on this call has seen or is in the middle of watching those very apartments going away in the aftermath of Second Avenue subway. So we wanted to bring this up as a second item for this evening's discussion. I think we had sent around, or we do have available, something from George Janes, right, Elizabeth, that he had put together in terms of the number of apartments that we had lost over the last, what was it, 10 years, I think, or 5 years? I've forgotten the length of time.
It is a bit out of date, but George Janes did provide it, and HPD surveys vacant apartments, which is where that list comes from. And I think that what these reveal is we have counterproductive situations here that we haven't dealt with. And our construction in District 8, I think, you think the problem was homeless billionaires, because that's what we build for here. And we lose, as you see, the rent stabilized. They're not officially, you don't have to qualify for a rent stabilized apartment, but it is something that allows people who work here to afford to live here. And on the other hand, the landlord probably loses money. On the vacant apartments, and I think this is something that we should look at and think about and decide or talk about next week, is that on the one hand, everybody says we've got to build all this housing, and one of the maybe City of Yes, but whatever that it says that they want to. They've got this wonderful idea that we'll build 125,000 units of housing in 10 years, and 125 versus 200,000 that are sitting there vacant. And I think that how you incentivize people to get those things back on the market. Obviously, if somebody has taken his apartment off the market, and it says here how many waiting for a refrigerator, 22% of them are waiting for a refrigerator. They have, that's an excuse that they need an incentive to restore it or whatever, or put it back on the market. And a disincentive to keep it off for probably a very good reason from their point of view. But I think it's something that we should study as we and recommend the various agencies who can deal with this to make changes that do incentivize people to do the right thing and disincentivize people from doing the things that loses affordable housing. So I know that we sent these. Elizabeth Rose had a very discouraging example, and I hope maybe she will share that with us. But it's a sort of, and I think the conversation that we've had also reveals that whatever we're doing is counterproductive, and we want to make it productive. So, okay, we've got a member of the public. So Ed, do you want to
Yes.
call on people?
Sure. Leah?
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Near me on 2nd Avenue, there are some walk-ups that have apparently been derelict for well over 10 years. One person seems to live in them, but for years, the upstairs windows were left open and pigeons went in and out. And every so often I look it up on the Department of Buildings site. It has a lot of violations, and recently it had more, and they seem to have done some work. And now there are signs in the commercial space at the bottom for rent. I assume these buildings are being, what's the term, warehoused for development, but it's been years, maybe 15 years. And how many affordable apartments would have been in 3 walk-up buildings? A lot. So this is an example of affordable housing that's gone away, but I don't really know. I'm sure there's more like that. I don't know what can be done about it.
I think that's an example of, hey, the big money, being able to wait it out.
15 years?
Yeah. Takes a while to put those parcels together. Right? Marco's nodding. I mean, it's not, right. I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying that's what I've seen. An example that yes, it's large. But I'm not saying that's the case in that building, but that sometimes is what happens. It takes a long time. I don't know. Anyway, well, DJ, we could unmute DJ.
Oh, I can unmute. Thank you. I appreciate it. Actually, addressing the last point, thanks, Leah. One of the ballot propositions, you're talking about large builders. We do have small builders. I think it's very hard for them to wait out the whole land use process, and they can't assemble plots like that. One of the ballot propositions was to make things easier for small builders as well, who could maybe take one of those buildings and knock it down and put up something smaller without opining on land use costs. But zooming out on the topic at hand and the numbers that Elizabeth was showing, which was really helpful. we have lost a ton of affordable apartments. And it's not just them getting knocked down on the avenues to get replaced by the as of right developments. A lot of it is on the mid blocks. I'll keep reciting this point because I think that's where most of the units being lost actually have gone. A lot of consolidations on the mid blocks that used to be townhomes with multiple units becoming single family homes, which is, we hear them come to landmarks and transportation to ask to do things to the sidewalks in front of the building. And, that's fine. That's their prerogative. I think vacancies are important, but I see numbers like 900,000 or 1 million units that were in the hole as a city to get rents to something a little bit more reasonable. So even if we could get all the vacant apartments back online, which will be very hard because of HSTPA and other things that were mentioned, it's not enough. Which is why you increasingly hear that we do got to build, baby build, including from the new administration, even saying he's okay with private developers. I know we don't always love seeing the huge buildings go up on the avenues. I don't think downzoning the avenues is a smart option if anyone would consider putting that forward, because that'll just give us smaller, even more luxurious units. But the other thing that we need to consider, which a lot of people will not like to hear, is allowing a bit more density on the mid blocks. I know people really like R8B zoning. We like the look and feel that it gives us with the brownstones, the uniform 6 stories, the street wall. But that's where we've lost a lot of units. That's where if you allowed 8 to 12 stories to some degree, made it more economical for small projects to go up, you would see quite a bit of infill and a bit of supply. So I think that is something we should consider as a board, but I know it's also like a third rail I've gathered just in my few short months being here. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks for your thoughts. Elizabeth Rose.
Thank you. Actually, DJ, I think, did you just join the board this recent cycle? Okay, so Adam Wald and I spent all of calendar year 2024 leading a task force to develop proposals to address the zoning of the remaining, it's about a dozen blocks on the Upper East Side where, particularly in the mid block, current zoning actually prevents any residential construction whatsoever. It prevents conversions, it prevents new development, because there are still vestiges of commercial zoning or manufacturing zoning on the Upper East Side. And we went through a year-long effort and developed block by block proposals, which included R8A, which allows for some of the larger buildings that you're describing on the mid blocks, as well as there are actually a couple of avenue locations that are not yet at an R10. And so yes, there is a lot of third rail around existing R8B, but we also did, and the board unanimously supported our recommendations that we take them to DCP, just go through an effort where we did exactly what you were suggesting on blocks that currently are not zoned residential at all. So broader basis, I agree that R8B is more supported, but we have been making some efforts, and we'd love to share that work with you. Separately, Elizabeth Ashby mentioned my name earlier, and so I was going to bring this up in new business, but I think it might be an appropriate thing here, particularly since Elizabeth mentioned that I had an idea. My idea is not specific to rent stabilized housing. It is more general than that. The work of DCP and the Manhattan Plan and a lot of the criticism of Community Board 8, but also some other areas as well, is that we're simply not building enough new housing. And the reality is that we are net positive in the Community Board 8 area, but it is effectively impossible to build any new housing without demolishing existing housing on the Upper East Side because we are already an extremely dense residential neighborhood. So I see one of our biggest challenges as even when new construction is going up, what we're not generally seeing significant increases in the number of units that are being built because we're seeing the demolition of lower rent, smaller units, and the construction of generally luxury, larger units. And so we are seeing buildings being built with significantly greater FAR than the buildings that are being demolished, and significantly greater height and density than the buildings that are being demolished, but with fewer apartments. And so as a board, we just saw this example last week of 800 Fifth Avenue, which is being proposed at a more than 50% cut in the number of units in that location. We're seeing 985 Fifth Avenue, the Elliott Spitzer building, where again, we are seeing the proposal for a larger building with fewer units. I know, Marco, in your surveys that you have been doing and maintaining for quite some time, you have other examples. The New York Times did an article on this. And that is going to continue to happen on the Upper East Side because larger apartments are so much more valuable, and there seems to be a pretty inexhaustible demand for very large, even very expensive apartments. So the real question is there anything that we can do to ensure that we are generating more units, not just more density, not physical density? And so I would like to see the community board or this committee discuss a potential resolution calling on city council or administration for some legislation that basically requires, in the case of a demolition or substantial demolition, to cover our 800 Fifth Avenue example, that the new building that replaces the old building must have at minimum the same number of apartments, and ideally some sort of escalating formula that says, if you are tripling the FAR or quadrupling the FAR, you need some sort of increase in the number of units so that we don't continue to build exclusively extremely large, extremely expensive luxury apartments while we are demolishing rental apartments. And even if they're not rent stabilized apartments, it is still a reduction in units. And ultimately, we as a community are going to get dinged by the new ballot initiatives and those rules simply based on production of new units or increase in units, which we are not going to be able to win in that kind of a war. So it will be a double whammy where developers are going to build fewer units than they are demolishing. And then we're going to get larger buildings imposed in the neighborhood because we are losing units. It kind of reminds me, and this is now a sidebar, the definition of chutzpah, the person who throws himself on the mercy of the judge, having killed both parents because he is now an orphan. That's the catch-22 that I see our community falling into.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Sorry, Ed, I just thought I'd jump in there.
No, please do.
No, I think Elizabeth obviously makes an extremely good point, and we ought to be proposing ways in which we can in a way deal with the problem that I think that when we brought this issue up with Department of City Planning in the past, the response has been has been to not really acknowledge that people being forced from their homes is an issue by new development, forced from their homes by new development, which even if they could somehow be in suspended animation for the period of construction, they couldn't afford to live there anyway. And I think that I think that that's a problem. And as Elizabeth points out, it's a big problem for us in our district, because so little of our district is not already built up. It's not like there are lots of vacant lots. So maybe we have some people queued up, so maybe we should call them.
Okay. We can unmute Michelle. Right? Yes? Yeah.
So this community board has already addressed this, and Marco has already fine-tuned what we've addressed by asking, and we were shooed away from city planning by asking for a height limit on York, First, Second, and Third Avenues. We were addressing this, especially because we were asking for a 210. Now, Marco refined that by asking for R10A zoning on those avenue blocks. And what that would mean is a 20% bonus on the 210 height limit for affordable housing. He and I took this to all of the elected officials, down to city planning, made presentations. He's got a long presentation with visuals and diagrams and stats and everything, very explanatory. He and I took it all around, and because the philosophy of this administration, with Dan Garodnick at City Planning being the biggest advocate, as evidenced by his Midtown zoning as he led that fight, he is a believer in height. And he premises that, he says, because if it's higher, you're going to get more apartments. Well, in fact, on the Upper East Side, the higher you went, the less apartments you got. And that's because they're different kind of apartments. And that's still going to be the case. So you have a 400-foot building with 50 condos, and that's the priority and the business of the developer. We don't usually tell a person what they can do with their property, although there certainly is a push to change that. So I liken this to the vacant storefronts. I mean, why do we have so many vacant storefronts? There looks like there's a tremendous blight everywhere. So you wonder, gee, what's in it for that landlord not to maybe drop his rent a little bit and rent the premises? No, he'd rather keep it empty. Well, there's got to be a reason for that. There's either a write-off against some other property somewhere else. You know, I mean, I'm not getting into that, but there's a reason for that. And this is the same thing. Now, when I haven't thought this through, and I wouldn't like to toss that out until we have a very, very thorough investigation about repercussions. But in general, I'm not in favor of like having a city resolution about how many apartments you have to build in a certain place. I'm not sure what kind of repercussion that would have going down the line, whether it be on the avenues or the mid-block. So I wouldn't jump into that so quickly. But I'm just saying we offered what would be a wonderful solution. And there's no interest. There was no interest with the city. And so it goes. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I would like to put in also that the community board and this committee had a proposal for 2 special zoning districts, and among the things that they did, that we proposed, was saving the tenements on First, Second, Third, and York. And we couldn't get it through city planning. They wouldn't even start figuring out whether they could certify it. I think also something that the laws that of like the huge city of yes thing and so on, I think that people have to recognize that I believe that Community District 8 is the most densely populated residential district in the United States. And I think that treating the whole city the same, I think each has different problems. But I mean, people say, oh, it's a District 8 is community, Upper East Side, it's all rich people, they don't want. We've protested all along of our, we have no affordable housing practically anymore. And so I think it ought to be considered here that we are already very densely populated. And also, I think as we make proposals for whatever it is, I think that the scale, character, and livability of each community should be protected. And as well as getting affordable housing. And that's where I think all these vacancies, we have more vacancies than they approve building, that they propose building. So I think that that's the sort of thing that we must consider to incentivize people to put them back. And, they must have some big incentive to take their product, which is an apartment, off the market. So I won't hold it up any longer, but I think that this is a more complicated issue than just building in the mid blocks and so on.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Marco?
Thank you. The first thing that I had to be very clear is what is density? Density normally is established with number of people in one specific place. But also density, we call the number of apartments when you file in the Department of Buildings. So that is, we have to be very clear, because density is established the number of apartments. Now, with the zoning resolution, they establish a density according with the zoning resolution. So if it's R10, it's 10 times, and they divide it by 680. That is the factor that they use. Let me give you an example so we can understand that part. If you have a lot 68 by 100, it's 6,800 square feet. If the factor is 10, it's 68,000 square feet. And if the factor is 680, you have 100 apartments. So you cannot build 101. You have to be 100. And that is good. But also the problem what I find is as long as you do the calculations, you can put as much lower as you can. So you can say it, well, I'm going to put in 100 apartments, I'm going to put one dwelling unit. And that's it. That's what basically happened now in the area of the landmark. 12,000, 15,000 building, one apartment. So the issue is, if we want to do something, we have to control not only the maximum density, but we have to calculate also the lower density. a good example is all the developments, the new developments in the avenue, all of them without no exception. The maximum they build is 54%. I can demonstrate with the numbers. And the minimum, I think, is reached 24%. I'm sorry, yeah, 24%. And there is a good example. One chair of the transportation, they came this developer, this tenant, and he called my attention. They said they are just only in this building in Madison Avenue. It has just only 16 apartments. Immediately, I do the calculations, and they're supposed to have 100 and I think 104, 110 apartments. So that is the issue that we had to control, because if we allow to put lower density, it means less apartments, you're never gonna be successful. And I believe the supply and demand is the key right now, especially for the prices. The prices, basically, if there are less housing, you have to pay more. If there are more housing, you have to pay less. Very simple rule. So in the event now, the city, they claim, city planning, they claim that they have 500,000 dwelling units in deficit. The Charter Commission declare that they have 700 dwelling units. So the city of yes, they're going to build 110 over the 15 years. So we're always going to have deficit of housing, a large deficit. And if we continue, do not control the lower density, we're going to get even less apartment, but we're going to build taller and super tall buildings. And that is the example of all buildings on the avenues. One developer, he called my attention very well. The developer on 86th Street on York Avenue. This is an L-shaped lot. He demolished, well, I consider affordable housing because that is the only housing that for those people. So when I saw that, I do the calculation right away. This developer, what he did, because he has control on the height of the building. So in that area, he can build 210. So at the end, he built 230 feet, and he built the density to 85%. So that means he built a lot of apartments. He built for the rich too on the top, which is fine. It means I'm not against to build luxury housing. For me, I think it's great. There's nothing wrong. But we have to build for all the incomes in the society. So middle income, low income. So the issue is that this development it reached 85% approximately. And he was doing business, and he was doing very well. This is a developer. That's not my development. This is the developer. By the way, this development, Ed, came to us, and that's what we know that very well, that development. They did the presentation in one of the housing meetings. So, and I pay attention, I was in opposition, but then after I review all the projects that is building in the avenues, I found that this is the best solution. And I said inside of me, I regret that we shouldn't start supporting these kind of developments in the Upper East Side. So this is a good example. This is a developer that he's making money because the goal of the developer is making money, and that is fine. I'm not in disagreement with that. What I'm disagreement is just only to target some specific people, and that is wrong. The other development that caught my attention is the development 79 on First Avenue. They demolished, I think it was 79 dwelling units, affordable units. Sometimes they can call me, that is not affordable, you pay $2,000 or $3,000. They are right. But according with the market, I think that is affordability. So this guy, he did something even nicer. He demolished the 79 dwelling units and he put a community facility. Like we don't have hospitals. We have a corridor of hospital below 72nd Street on York Avenue. So we have plenty, and they are coming to us even more floor area. The tallest building for hospital is going to be in that area. So they receive great benefits. Now, this building on 79 and 80th Street on First Avenue is completely just only for medical facility, when we need to build housing, no medical facility. And I think there are some issues that we can address and we can organize, but we have to have some control. If we don't have some control, in this case, density, we cannot see projects that's going to banish housing. And I think that is my point. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. Anthony or Elizabeth or no? No.
No,
All right.
go ahead, Adam.
All right, Adam.
So, in somewhat of a response to Elizabeth, one of the things that the city, I guess technically is the state, has done with the old 421A and the new 485X program is that anytime you demolish a unit and you build a new development that's going to enjoy the 485X program, that unit, whether it was rent stabilized, market, that unit has to be an affordable unit. So what's happening is that there are certain developers who are looking at sites who would want to build rental housing, but because the site had so many units on it, they can't economically build a mixed income development. So certain projects that are going up now, they are totally avoiding building mixed income rental, because if you demolish a site that has 30 units on it, no matter what type of units they were, your new building has to have 30 affordable units in it. So as much as we want to control the number of units for a new development, you're also up against this other issue, which is that every new unit you replace has to be an affordable unit. So it's making it very challenging to build mixed income rental housing unless the site that you're building on previously only had essentially a few units. Look at the corner of 71st and 2nd Avenue that was sold as 1347. That had something like 40 or 50 units in it. If you were to build new rental housing there, if you could build 100 units there, half of them would have to be affordable. So your rental developers are essentially being pushed away. They can't build because they can't build 30, 40, 50% affordable and compete with the condo buyers for sites, especially in the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, and even parts of Midtown, basically all of Manhattan, south of 96th Street. The rental developers can't afford to build rental housing unless the site they're building on had very few units to begin with. So that's why you're seeing someone tear down 198 units and build 55 units, or tear down 70 units and build 40 units, because they're just going to be condo. So if you can find some sites where there are not a lot of existing apartments, I'm sure rental developers would be all over it.
Okay. Elizabeth Rose.
Let's let Dylan Kennedy speak first. He hasn't spoken yet, and I'll come back.
Yes. Sorry, Dylan. Please go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's actually good that I got to speak after Adam, because I think you raised some points that I wasn't fully aware of. I liked the idea before of a resolution saying whenever we demolish a building that it should be replaced with a unit with a building. If it's larger, there should be more units, so we're not destroying a building with 30 units and replacing it with something taller with only 20. It sounds like there are already existing restrictions on that for rental units. I wonder if for the condos, we could pass some resolution asking for something similar that says, look, even if those condos aren't necessarily going to be, affordable condos, because we don't have that same structure, we can say if you're demolishing 30 units to replace it with condos, those should be replaced with a greater number of condo units than the rental units lost. And I know we mentioned in response to that we tried lots of other different proposals that the city didn't really like or didn't run with. But I'm intrigued that this could be a new angle. We pass a resolution and we kind of see what local electeds think in response, and maybe that's a good way of pushing things forward since they didn't like some of the other ideas such as height limits. So that's my pitch. I don't think I can actually second that since I've spoken to it, but I encourage someone else to push forward the proposal previously submitted before me.
I don't know if I'm clear on what it was. Could you say it again? What the
Sorry,
exact
yes, and
proposal is? I kind of lost it in the.
No, that's fair, and I apologize because there was a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I missed who suggested this, but there was a recommendation for a resolution that says when there's a substantial demolition of a building, that should only be approved if the building replacing it has more units than the building being demolished.
Oh, I think that was Elizabeth Ashby. Elizabeth Ashby was talking? No, wasn't Elizabeth?
Yes, I think so.
I thought it was
But I
Elizabeth
wasn't
Ashby.
sure.
I thought it was Elizabeth Ashby brought that up, and that was what Adam was responding to. Was it? It was Elizabeth Ross. I see you waving, Elizabeth. Yeah.
This wasn't what I brought up. No.
Okay.
I mean, I brought up a lot, but not that.
Okay. Okay. So
I
that's
apologize. I'll try to keep track of who it was next time.
No, it's all good. So the motion is then for any time we have a demolition. Well, Elizabeth Rose, what is it? Why don't you say what it is, Elizabeth? Michelle, I see you waving, but I'm going to defer.
So I don't think we're at a point of proposing a resolution right now. My goal in raising this was I think this is something that deserves some conversation. And Dylan, I really appreciate your following up on it more directly. There's clearly some aspects, things that I don't know. For example, what Adam Wald raised about the 485X program. And I will be very clear, I was not thinking specific to only rental buildings. I was not thinking only specific to buildings that are applying for tax abatements. I was thinking more conceptually. But the conceptual idea, I think, deserves a focused conversation about how do we promote increase in units when we are seeing demolition of existing housing, because at least in this community, the values are such that left to a pure free market, we are going to continue losing units. And, as a city, we need to solve for more units. And as a community, we will continue to get blamed as we lose units, even though nobody on this call or this Zoom has anything to do with the fact that we are losing units to demolition and lower unit reconstruction. I think density, Marco, is a bunch of things. It's not only, it is the actual FAR. It is also the number of units within that FAR and the number of people in it. So I am not proposing a specific resolution at this time. I am proposing that this committee hold a focused discussion on that topic, and specifically, what can we do to promote increased units, particularly when units are being demolished to make way for new housing.
Yeah.
And it deserves, I think,
Sure,
more time, a focused conversation, and bringing, whatever data or information to the table we can to inform the conversation.
I think also to your point, an ongoing question. I mean, it's also a matter of just pure economics, as I've been told by land use attorneys. Let's just call it for what it is. I find it's almost surreal that our district is the one, if I may, speaking as to it. I don't think, by the way, the new legislation we get punished per se, but that's a different question as to the bottom 12 community districts. But the issue then, it's just a matter of economics. The dirt that that we live upon is just more bloody expensive than any other patch of dirt, if you will, in the city. It just is as a matter of course. That's just the matter of economics, and so it becomes difficult.
And the highest value per square foot
right,
that
correct.
you
Yes,
can
if I may. Right.
receive is for a very large condo apartment.
Well, I don't know about that, but all I know is that the cost of that
I do.
of land. Okay,
Yeah.
oh, all right, but if I may, so the point is that the cost of land, as I understand it, in a general sense, is anywhere from 30 to 40% of your fixed costs if you're putting up buildings and or what it may be. Marco's shaking his head. It depends on where you are when you build, but here it's a big chunk because it's expensive to buy the land unless you're getting it free, right, Marco? In this little patch of heaven that we live in, it's very expensive to put up concrete and rebar and buildings and apartments, whether it's 680 or whatever it may be. So it's a doubly vexing, I guess is my point to yours, Elizabeth, which is it's doubly vexing to come up with that creation of more in our district because it's so, I believe, doubly hard economically to make it, profitable for people to build apartments here.
Yeah.
Marco, you are nodding vociferously, so we will unmute you to continue on.
No, at all. It's just some parts I agree, disagree, but I think that's the point, to brainstorm the ideas. But my point is, I would like to put a strong emphasis that, for instance, the city of Yes, I wasn't surprised. That's another program that the former Mr. Spilzer, the former governor, he came, we approved 210, and he came back for 230. And they said, yes, I give you $7 million for that 20 feet and some floor area. And I think, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but the point is, this is another kind of program. My perception is, if you use public funding, it has to have some benefits and strong benefits. But if you don't use public benefits, such as most of the developments in the Upper East Side, because the developers, they know very well that it's hot real estate. So they can come with their own money, most of them, except one developer that was one former community board member. He was using public funds. I mean, we have to differentiate between when there is money that give you the government to build housing. That is another concept. But the concept what I was referring is the developer, they bought the land. And by the way, let me talk about a little bit the land, the cost of the land. And in one of the programs that we saw presented by NYU, he put the cost on the Bronx as $32 per square feet. The lot on 79 and First Avenue, Santa Monica, sold for $350 per square feet. So that gives you an idea what's going on. So I guess going toward to the east western side, it will be probably more expensive, and it will depend also the supply and demand. If the developers they find something that is attractive, they're gonna put money. And I was surprised the former governor demolished this building just only to reduce the apartment and make more rentable. He's gonna make more money. See, if he paid $7 million, he probably gonna have 100 times of that, which is fine. I mean, I'm not against the development. What I'm thinking is, if we control, we have a tool. This tool is called land use or the zoning resolution. And if we would discuss only in the Upper East Side, the Upper East Side, I don't know why they leave purposely R10. Then you go to the northern side, now start changing to lower density, lower zoning resolution, R10, R7, that's usually more frequently. And why? even though that we have the same avenue, the same street, the same service, the same transportation, we have almost everything. So the first speculator in the city of the land is city planning, because city planning, he has to release some land so they can incentivize the developers and see it, what is the best choices that they can do. Another good example is Park Avenue. We have our 10. Grand Concourse, we have our 8 buildings and 6 stories, 6-story buildings. So the great speculator in the city is city planning. City planning has to release the land. It has to create more opportunities for many developers. Not only target the Upper East Side. The Upper East Side is a whole real estate. As I said before, most of the developers, they come in and they love to put the money right here because they know they're gonna get big bucks. And that's fine, that's nothing wrong. But we have to control and benefit of our community. Yes, we have under development site on the NYCHA developments. I did an exercise over there. And they have, I think, if I'm not wrong, it is 2,500 dwelling units in a lot that we can put double or more than double over there. And this is a free cost of the land in the Upper East Side. But there are some speculation, political situations that they don't want to move from that to increase to use properly that lot, and that will be a good place to create affordable housing. So there are different situations. From my point of view, I believe that if the developer doesn't want to build within the lot, okay, fine, build it in the Upper East Side anywhere, but build it something. I'm not in the position that it has to be within the building. It has to be everywhere within our community. That it should be a good policy. So the developer has an opportunity to build whatever they want, but produce affordable housing at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. Next, we'll go to Craig. But before that, if I remember, our community district had probably one of the largest vacant city-owned lots on 74th Street. I forgot what we built over there by the river. I don't think it was housing, though. Craig is up next. If we could.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. I've just been listening for most of the time, and I really appreciate a lot of the comments that were made. I think there's a lot of thoughtful discussion so far, and I think I agree that we want to just make sure we're being very deliberate as we're looking at this issue going forward. And obviously, there's been a lot of discussion in the past, and there's a lot of history within this committee in terms of the zoning aspect of it. But I just want to reiterate, I think that we need to just make sure we're being deliberate and also realistic. And I know this is sort of the I don't know if it's taboo to say, but I think we do have to recognize the political reality of what we're going to be facing over the next 4 years and recognize the framework that we may very well be working within. I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing is not going to just be something that is more cosmetic in nature and seems to be just throwing a dart at the issue, and city planning is going to come back to us and be like, no, that's not in it's in conflict with what the new administration is going to be. I think we need to try to work within the framework in which we're going to be facing and see if we could come up with solutions. And again, I think if the solutions were easy, they'd already be in place. As much as I like the idea of trying to mandate that we replace all the loss of affordable units or housing units with new units, I think we have to just consider the realities of the pressures of the market, which we've discussed at length. And I also just want to acknowledge, again, probably not the most popular point, but a realistic point, which is, yes, we are a community board 8 Manhattan. We are worried about how we are going to be addressing this issue in our community, and the numbers point to the stark realities of the loss of units. But I do think it is important to keep in mind that this is a citywide issue, and the amount of the housing crisis extends well beyond our borders. And if we want to see the pressures be alleviated, we need to just make sure that we're not doing something that upends what is happening elsewhere in the city, where they may have different priorities in place, but I think we are all interested in the same outcomes, which is seeing more affordable housing and being able to prevent just luxury housing from inundating us. So those are the only points I want to make, and I appreciate the discussion, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for your thoughts. DJ, back to you.
Yeah, I hope I'm not changing direction too much. I had a couple things which I think I had for new business, but they've sort of come up already. So for Adam and Elizabeth, the task force rezoning plan, has there been any talk about getting it on DCP's radar going into the new year? And making sure they're going to act on it, just to close the loop on that one. And then I'll put my second one in as well. CB7, their land use committee, put forward a two-part resolution just like a month ago, which was Manhattan Plan recommendations, which I think they ended up passing basically unanimously in the full board. And I know we've been talking about what actions can we take, and maybe it's time to plan something like that. So very briefly, I have them up. They discuss single room occupancy legalization, new construction options and modality. They also talk about city-owned land and being able to build more housing there. I think, Ed, to your point that you just made, maybe it would be useful for us to identify a bunch of those parcels in the neighborhood. They looked at a lot of the public school sites, FDNY, NYPD.
I think
Then
Springer's done a lot on that, DJ, by the way. Well, when he was
and then they proposed a bunch of sites to upzone to R11 in some of the denser areas, which is something we could consider as well. So I'm not saying let's emulate everything CB7 did, but they have kind of been first movers, and we might want to consider something similar. Thanks.
Thank you. Who is up? Adam is up next. No, actually, Gail Barron is up. We haven't. Hi, Gail. Nice to see you. And we saw your picture before. You're live, so let's unmute Gail.
Sorry about that.
We haven't
No,
heard from her
I
this
have a
evening.
question, particularly with DJ raising CB7. When we looked at the numbers of the decrease that we have on the Upper East Side and then the 56,000 plus units that they managed to put in place, same time frame on the Upper West Side, was what drove that? Was it city-owned property? Was it that the Department of Planning was more rational when it came to the Upper West Side? Was the West Side really being, I see Elizabeth wants to answer that. You know, how did it happen? Yeah.
Had to turn the camera.
So first of all, the Upper West Side, CB7 in particular, has not seen a huge increase in housing. And so there's just a factual issue, Gail, with I think what you have just said.
Well, what I'm asking is what we were shown earlier.
No, what we were shown earlier showed that CB7 also had a very significant loss of affordable housing units just below us.
No, I'll never get unmuted again.
Okay. Upper West Side is almost as bad as we are.
Maybe I miss.
Yeah, there it is.
I mean, they have had, so this is an increase in rent stabilized units. They've had the same number as we did in terms of decreased. So their net loss is less bad than ours, but they still have a huge net loss of affordable units.
Okay.
Or of rent stabilized units, which is not the same thing as affordable. And in terms of the total housing production or lack of production in the district, I don't think CB7 is much different than we are. For some reason, the website that I'm on is just on a spin right now, and I'm not able to get the data up very quickly, but I can do that following this meeting. So let me address. Gail, are you done, or should I?
Yes, I am. No, that's fine.
Okay. So let me just address some of the questions that DJ had about the rezoning effort that we did and as it relates to Manhattan Plan. So we did have a meeting with DCP specifically about the rezoning proposals. What they basically said to us was, well, we're working on the Midtown South rezoning, and then we are working on the Manhattan plan, and you're a distant third, and not even clear that third is the position that our proposal is in. I need, just give me a minute and I will just come back to you in a second, John. In terms of CB8 and response to the Manhattan plan, Valerie, sort of all comments were due to the Manhattan plan. I think it was on like September 30th. So CB8 did in fact send a letter that formally included our upzoning proposals as part of CB8's formal response to the Manhattan plan. As well as actually, Marco, you raised something that was in that response, which is, how is it that we're at R10 on all of our avenues, but you look immediately to our north and to our south, and on the same avenues with the same public transportation, they have lower density zoning. That does not appear to make a whole lot of sense, and a number of other things. But yes, we also identified some very specific lots, including the continued vacant portion of that East 74th Street lot that Ed just referenced a few minutes ago. The main portion of that lot was built out for Hospital for Special Surgery. There is another large portion of that lot that is publicly owned and empty. So we included in the response that lot and a couple of other lots that are city owned or in one case privately owned, but appear to be ripe for residential development. So I don't think the response got into questions like SROs. Those were historically part of the Upper West Side. I don't think that was so much a part of the Upper East Side landscape. And then the last thing that you specifically asked about were R11s. In the whole City of Yes for Housing Opportunity process, Community Board 8 actually voted on each individual proposal within the City of Yes, and the Community Board voted against mapping R11 and R12 zones. So that was not included as a recommendation in the response to the Manhattan plan, or to the formal input for the Manhattan plan. So I think I covered a whole bunch of questions in there, and I will stop.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. No, that's very informative. I know it's getting late, and I was going to say, though, something, again, to continue the conversation, but I was going to say, when you're talking about that public spot, Elizabeth, I drive by there. A lot of people on this call are familiar with it. The Epiphany Church that used to be on that corner for a long time, a lovely building. That building went down and housing went up, but not a part that was built only for, I won't say names. Those who've been playing and with us a long time know who it was built for. The folks who occupy the public land across the street. So it's built for specific people. That's another issue again to talk about. But it's been a very long evening. I know we have old business and new business to get to, but I know people may be anxious for a motion to adjourn, but I don't want to speak for anyone. I will kick it back over to Anthony and to Elizabeth to go into old and new business. And on this topic, maybe we adjourn to continue on, because I think a lot of very informative stuff, especially what you just brought up, Elizabeth Ashby. So Anthony and Elizabeth.
Okay. So I will call for old business if there is any. And I see no. Okay. Or for that matter, new business. Good. Okay. I think just in closing, before somebody makes a motion, I think that we should take this up again next month, and perhaps try and come closer to a committee consensus on how we would like to make our views known both to the board and then to our elected officials. And I think that that's something that we can, in fact, look at next month.
By the way, Anthony, just a quick aside, PSA for those of us on the call. Next month, we will be meeting on the 16th, which is the day before, not our usual night next month. We'll be meeting on the 16th, which is the day before full board. Tuesday, the 16th in December. That's our scheduled meeting.
Right.
Sorry about that. Just
No. Good point. Michelle.
Move to adjourn, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Enjoy the holiday.
I see no one
I
saying
hope
no,
those are seconds.
so
I think those are seconds.
those are seconds. All right. And I'm sure we all agree.
Okay.
Happy